Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We're going to start at the top. Tax Committee.
Yeah. We have a Tax Committee meeting today at 10 o'clock, and Commissioner Franz will be addressing the committee at 10:30. I'd like to visit today about the Tax Relief and Job Creation Act, House File 2337. Basically, what we're trying to do here is make Minnesota simply a more competitive place to do business. That's what this bill is all about. Allow Minnesota companies to create, but not just to create jobs, but to retain jobs. We want to keep the employers that are here, and we want them to be able to expand and give them a good reason to do that. We want to continue the trend of having Minnesota being a leader in the bioscience area, the medical device area, encourage growth and investment throughout the state. That's what House File 2337 does, and we will be finishing that bill up today and sending it over to the Ways and Means Committee. A few more specifics about the bill is we're increasing the research and development credit for Minnesota companies by $25 million. This will enable companies to create high-paying jobs throughout the state. It simply makes Minnesota a much more attractive place to do business. We're going to increase a current program, the Angel Investment Tax Credit. We're going to put $5 million more into that program. The full allotments of credits has been utilized by this program since its inception, and so we're going to put more into that program that has worked very well. We are going to allow small businesses, this is very important, small businesses to take upfront capital exemptions rather than having to go through the whole refund process. And so where a company buys something today and then they have to apply for a refund, we're just going to let them take that up front. We'll have in the bill an Internship Grant program administered through the Office of Higher Education. It's aimed at attracting and keeping talent in Greater Minnesota. A 40% grant up to $1,250 per intern for employers. A very interesting concept that has been working in New Jersey, brought to us by Representative Mazerall, is called a net operating loss carry forward provision, where if a company that's starting out that shows some promise, they're starting what they have losses, they'll be able to sell those losses to an established company that is making money. That will infuse money into the startup company and create some capital to allow them to hopefully become profitable. Very important, a jobs tax credit for veterans, employer credits for hiring either disabled, unemployed vets, up to $9,600 credit per veteran. That's a Representative Bill's piece of legislation. And one that we had a press conference here, you were all here a few months ago, regarding the statewide business property tax reduction. We've changed it a little bit. Originally we had, I think it was a $100,000 exclusion. We went to $150,000. Now what we've done is we've gone to $150,000 and you can take 70% of the statewide commercial business property tax. You can get a 70% reduction on the first $150,000 of value. Another big portion of the bill that has been rolled into the bill, we did that yesterday, were the Tif Provisions. And you say, well, so what, Tif Provisions? You got a lot of towns out there that have some TIF districts and so forth. But these are very, very important for helping to create jobs and to expand businesses. And, of course, the largest one there is the Mall of America TIF. Phase 1 will be left as it is, and it will run out in 2016. Then those funds will start going to the city, the county, the school district, and so forth. And what we're looking at is the Phase 2 to extend that out. In the bill right now, we have a 10-year extension, and the Mall of America folks made their case a couple nights ago, and that is in the current bill that will be passed out today. So with that, I would open it up for questions. Well, before I do that, I'd like to give just a few examples of the property tax reductions that some of our counties will see. We just picked out a few counties. Clay County, they'll see a 20.1% reduction in their statewide business property tax up front, and then, of course, it'll be phased out over a period of 12 years. Nobles County, 23.7%, Washington County, 9%, Renville County, 11.3%. So what we're doing is we're allowing more money to stay in the private sector with the business where we can create jobs, where we can create wealth, rather than increasing spending and taking money out of the private sector where it can actually create wealth and consuming it within the public sector. So that is a jobs plan that will create jobs, and I would stand for any questions.
Mr. Chairman, is this still funded in part with a reduction in the renter's credit? And could you explain that to us, please?
Sure. What the renter's credit last year was 19%. This year, it's projected to be 17% for the next couple of years here. But if you look at the studies, you will see that it should be at about 14%. So what we're doing is we're putting it at 15%. We're putting in some special provisions for the disabled and senior citizens to help them. But I really believe that a renter's credit should be more accurate. If we're going to call it a renter's credit, it should reflect the cost of property taxes in the rent. 19% is simply too high. 17% is too high. 15% in my mind is a point too high. And we have to remember on this renter's credit, most states don't even have this. It's kind of an anomaly that Minnesota has this. But we're putting special provisions in for senior citizens and the disabled, and we'll be at 15%, which is still really higher than it should be.
Mr. Chairman, the Democrats will say that after what Republicans did last session with the homestead portion of it, that this is an additional hit, albeit against a somewhat different group, but it's an additional hit against middle-class Minnesotans.
Well, in 2010, we have to remember that the Democrats voted for a 15% renter's credit. So this is nothing new. We voted for one last year in 2010. The Democrats supported this, and so now all of a sudden they can't support a fair renter's credit. I guess you'll have to ask them why they can't support a fair renter's credit.
Your bill, I assume, still raises some revenue through FOCs. I wonder if you could talk about why you're okay with that. You and some of your colleagues have criticized the governor for going that route.
Yes, and let's clear that up just a bit here, because we're leaving foreign royalties alone. That's the big one. That's the big concern with a lot of our major companies, our major job providers. We're not touching that. We are rearranging some of the FOC to try and benefit Minnesota companies better, because what we're doing is we're going in and we're freeing up some funds, and you'll basically be able to get whatever you were getting in the FOC. So we're not eliminating the FOCs. We're changing how they work. You'll either be able to get what you have in the FOCs or what your property tax on your properties in Minnesota is, whichever's less. So we're doing a little rearranging, but we're not touching the foreign royalties area. That would simply be a job killer. And we're not here to kill jobs. We're here to help the private sector create jobs.
What's the commissioner going to do? Is he just going to answer questions, or does he have some presentation?
I talked to my good friend Commissioner Franz this morning, and he's going to come in at 10:30 to go over the bill with the committee. He said it'd be a short presentation, and he said that he will point out some areas where there are some concerns, and we know that there'll be some concerns, and I'm looking forward to working with Commissioner Franz as we go through the process. And he just said he'd like to come and make a few comments. I said, you pick the time, we'll work with you on that. And so he'll kind of let us know, and that's good. We want to see some direction from the governor's office, and that's fine. And I've been able to work with Commissioner Franz very well, and we'll continue to do that.
Mr. Chair, on the FOC issue, which is a big part of the governor's supplemental budget, is there any way of reaching any sort of an agreement, a mid-ground with him that would allow some plugging of what he calls the FOC loophole? I know you see it differently, but is there any potential middle ground there?
Well, I see it quite differently, and the votes in our caucus are not there to change anything to do with the foreign royalties. And a lot of times the foreign royalties is the big one. The FOCs, I think we've taken quite a creative approach that actually really helps Minnesota businesses. You have bricks and mortar in Minnesota, and that means something to us. And so is there room to negotiate on that? Absolutely. The foreign royalties, no room. FOCs, we've got some room to talk.
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned earlier in the week that if the K-12 bill that passed on the floor last night became law and your bill became law, or if that bill, for the K-12 bill became law first, it might force some changes in your bill, given the use of the reserve funds and kind of the cash flow issue. I wonder if you could address that, and also, because that was what your take is on how to juggle both those issues if they both progress.
Well, thanks for that question. And actually, as I looked at it closer, the governor signs the K-12 paying the shift back, which I hope everybody wants to do. I know I certainly want to do that. Actually, this bill is quite neutral. We're not hitting the cash flow account, the reserves. By the time we got a conference committee, I'd say it'll be a wash. And so, in committee, the question was asked about, well, what happens if that goes and then this goes? This really shouldn't have that big of an impact on what happens with the cash flow account and the reserve account. So we should be good. We're trying to make it pretty even here.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, and compliment the chair on putting together a bill. If you all have listened and suffered through some of our discussions many times, this reflects what a lot of business owners came to us and said, this is what we need. The R&D tax credit for, especially for Minnesota companies, the angel investment tax credit, that's a lab everybody walked around the block when we signed that one last time. It's now been used up. That's a good thing. But that upfront exemption for those small business owners, this is on the ground making that decision. There will be business owners in the state that will make a decision based on this, saying, okay, I'm actually going to get the upfront exemption up front, not wait 6 or 7 months, a novel idea in government. But you look down and the net operating loss carry forward marketplace, if you look at the New Jersey example, and Chair Davids and the staff will be able to provide you some examples on this, this is very exciting. And it's critically important for Minnesota because we suffered a big hit with the Obamacare tax increase on med devices. That has done some real damage. You can look at some of the layoffs in some of our bigger Minnesota companies, med device companies. This is a way to help them not only come back, but also to look at maybe doing a little expansion or some R&D. So I compliment, and then of course compliment the chair on the small biz property tax relief as well. Again, if you don't sell your product, if you don't sell your service, the tax man or woman will still come and ask for those property taxes. The chair has done a fantastic job with his committee of putting together things that we have heard on the ground time and time again. So to your question, Jake, the chair is right. If this is a nets out the way it looks like it is now, and we will keep it that way, not only do we take care of some debt, but we start to help stimulate some business in the state of Minnesota again.
And with that, if there's no other questions, I will head over to get this bill passed.
Right. Oh, what's that?
What room is it?
200. And there's coffee. I'm bringing the coffee, and Representative Hortman is bringing the donuts, and so it's bipartisan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I get all coffeeed up and sugar. And I apologize for being late. My 5-year-old said that, Daddy, it's so hot out today I have to wear shorts. So I'm burning up on the playground, I think is the exact word. So I apologize for being 5 minutes late as we changed this morning. Just a week recap here. Probably one of the biggest things that we heard from the taxpayers in Minnesota, and actually from our Democrat colleagues, was to pay back the education shift. With the surplus that was in forecast, with the additional $430 million, we're well over $700 million in paying back that education shift. That is very remarkable. That is doing, from our standpoint, doing exactly what the taxpayers and a lot of the voters expect from us. We will look next week. The voter ID pass-through Ways and Means Permanent School Trust Fund is headed to the floor, and the permit reform bill is also heading to the floor. We'll have a second deadline next week, so again, expect quite a bit of committee time again, as the chair is here on Friday with donuts and coffee. And then we'll be in some of the committees. LIFO will have its first, last in, first out, will have its first conference committee meeting next week as well. And then the expansion of the GI bill, I believe, will be up in state government finance next week as well. So that's a brief recap, and again, compliments to the chair. I do believe his bill will pass out. That is a very, very good tax bill, complementing something, again, with the angel investment tax credit, something that worked very well last year, putting it into effect again, and if it's something that's working, we should continue to allow it to work, and if we can add to it, even better. So something I think is a very bipartisan good idea the governor hopefully will sign off on.
When will school trust fund and permitting be up?
You know what? It depends on the committees. We're going to move stuff through, but Jody will give you an update hopefully by Monday. But those are the two that will hopefully go to the floor next week, and we'll let you know probably by Monday.
When can we expect to see a bonding bill?
I think a lot of the final projects are coming together now. Senator Senjum has. It's almost like he's here. Senator Senjum is finishing up some of the projects, I think, in the Senate. I've spoken with Representative Howes. He's got, I think, a pretty good idea of where he's at with some of the smaller projects that maybe don't have a core of lobbyists or advocates down here. Larry's done a really good job of making sure to reach out to people that maybe can't afford to come to the Capitol, can't afford to send a lobbyist down here, so local projects. So I think we'll probably be pretty close.
Mr. Speaker, what are the prospects for those big-ticket items like St. Cloud, Rochester, Mankato convention centers, and I guess the Saints, too?
Sure. You know, and the definition is probably the best example of what they are. They're big projects. What we've looked at in a lot of cases are some of these things that really need to be fixed up and maintained. HEPRA is not exciting. It is not really thrilling, but it is something that's critically important, again, to maintaining the structure that we have. Before we add on to whatever burden it may be, whether it's on behalf of a city, whether it's on behalf of the state, Min School, University of Minnesota, we've got to maintain the buildings and the structures we have, roads, bridges as well. So I think if a project takes up a big chunk of that bonding dollars, it probably doesn't have as good a chance as some of these other projects that look at funding for HEPRA. You know, putting $100 million into HEPRA, you may fund 5, 10, 15 different projects. So I think that's probably you'll see more from that angle than probably from a one or two great big projects taking up a lot of that debt service.
Are any of those on the table, or is that just not being discussed?
You know, the chairs are still working on it. I know Senator I'm not going to make that slip. We're losing too many of our guys to the Senate anyway. Representative Howes and Senator Senjum, I believe, are going to touch base again the next couple of days here to probably hammer out the final things. But the bills will be different. They always are, and then we'll go to conference committee.
Do you expect the voter photo ID will be on the floor next week? Is that too soon, Mr. Speaker?
I don't know yet. It depends, again, on the committee deadlines and moving some of these bills through. Some have taken a little bit longer, which is fine, and we want good debate in committees, but we'll have a better idea on Monday.
And right to work, we'll have a hearing over on your side. Hasn't had one yet, right?
Yeah, it hasn't had one yet. You know, it's something, again, as a supporter, it's something that I have to gauge the will of the caucus and the committee time in the caucus. We've said that, you know, things like the tax chair's tax bill are far more important, you know, from right now to getting through, because those are things that we've heard from business owners very specifically that they would like. So we're going to push those things up first, and then if we do have time, you know, there's always a potential, but we're still going through that process in the caucus.
There's not the votes in the caucus, though, are there, for right to work?
You know, I wouldn't say that. I don't, you know, again, it's something we continue to talk about, but we're focused today on the tax bill. I mean, it is really critically important for us. Chair David's put together a great bill, and it's not a lot of money, but from what we've heard, especially, like I said, the R&D tax credit, the upfront exemption, those are things that small business owners are really dying for out there. And again,
But you haven't taken a head count on right to work in the caucus?
No, we have not.
And Mr. Speaker, so if I'm hearing you correctly, there's a possibility right to work might not meet the deadline. Is that?
There's a possibility. There's always that, yes. And again, not to belabor this net operating loss carry forward marketplace, it's a real sing-songy title, but this is something, if you look at the New Jersey example, is really exciting. It basically allows those businesses that are larger and profitable that have loss, or excuse me, the startups that have loss can then take that and give it to those bigger companies that can then write down a little bit. So if they got a product that has gone through the process, it's gone through the pipeline, and is now going to be sent out to market, they have a lot of burnt up of capital, and this will allow them. And the New Jersey example, we can get some of the advocates to give you a little bit more of the background, but the example they have seen has been an explosion in the pharmaceutical and med device industry. So something that we believe would be a great thing for Minnesota businesses.
Back to the education shift, where do you think you're at with the governor on that? Do you think there's a possibility you can sign some language on this?
We would hope so. The Senate will have probably maybe a little different version of it. So just like last in, first out, we want to leave it available in conference committee so that if there are some things that need to be added or some things that need to be removed, that we have the best opportunity to pass the bill, because I do think this is one thing that is very, very popular. I shouldn't say popular. It is very, very requested from our voters in Minnesota that this is something that they want to see paid back right away. And we do leave nearly $500 million in the reserve in the cash flow account as well.
Mr. Speaker, on LIFO, given that Conference Committee is going to meet for the first time next week, the governor's spokesman, Mr. Hume, said, a week before last, that he didn't see any way that this could be evolved to a point where the governor could sign it. So given that context, what kind of prospects do you have in Conference Committee?
Well, I'm a glass half full kind of person. I think there's always opportunity to look at these things. I know Mr. Hume's probably paid to not be as cheery and brightful, but that's all right. Or cheery and optimistic. But we're going to continue to work on it, not on behalf of the House and the Senate, but on behalf of the kids and the teachers. I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen to Representative Myra's speech on the House floor yesterday, but there wasn't a peep in the house, and there were a lot of pretty misty eyes on the House floor. She explained what a teacher had done for her, and this was 40, she said, not that I'm saying her age, please, but she said this was 45 years ago that teacher was excused from the school because when she signed her contract. That's what it's about for us. It's not about the deadline and will this be a win or a loss for the Republicans or for the Democrat governor. It's about the kids in the classroom and are they going to get the best teacher. So we continue to be optimistic. If at the end he's not going to sign it, I mean, that's his choice.
You had mentioned you're wanting to hold off on actually moving forward with the conference committee while those talks were ongoing. What signal should we take then that the conference committee is starting work next week?
Well, I mean, I think if you don't start the conference committee, you can't. You maybe hear from some of the advocates. We've had a lot of requests for people that would like to come in, just like they testified during the House and Senate committee hearing. So, maybe there are some different perspectives that can be brought to the table. People will, look at and say, oh, this is, didn't understand that. This is something we need to adjust. Brendan Peterson, our author in the House, has been very open to looking at all options, what could and couldn't be included in there. There need to be changes. But I think just to say no isn't going to do it for the advocates in this case, and that's not only school children, but their parents across the state. So starting the conversation in committee is always a good thing.
Are you any more or less willing today to be flexible on the rules in order to get the stadium bill into a hearing?
Again, I think there's still the opportunity today. I don't know if the Senate has scheduled a hearing for Senator Vanderveer's committee, but there is still an opportunity for that today. I think we will then address it after that. There are times, yes, in the past when bills have moved through the Rules Committee after deadline, but until there are some very significant questions answered, I think the Rules Committee and deadlines are the least of the questions to be answered.
So then you anticipate, Mr. Speaker, you won't make a decision till, I don't know, late this evening or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, may I give you my home phone number?
No, I'll be at a jamboree with a bunch of mini-mite hockey players. So
You said that the deadline is least of the questions. As you look at this project, what questions do you have, and are you supporting it, non-supporting it? Where do you stand?
Sure. Well, and I think, very, very clearly, we have all said, and I say we as in the governor, both the majority and minority leaders in the House, the general fund isn't going to be used to pay for a stadium. Right now, the way the bill sits is that's what backs up if the pull tabs don't come in. And if I'm blamed for looking out for the taxpayers in Minnesota, absolutely. We've said that all along, that we're not going to have the general fund back up a stadium proposal. So I think the fact that Minneapolis City Council, the mayor, have had absolutely no comments since the bill was supposed to be introduced, I believe, 2 weeks ago now. I think another is, how many votes are there? Has anyone asked the governor or the advocates for the bill how many votes they have in each one of these committees or on the floors? So I think if folks spend a lot more time worried about that, they'd probably be more productive than whether or not, I'm for or against the bill. I've said all along that they're going to get a fair process. I've not changed my mind on that. I've not changed what I believe is a good and fair process for the Vikings and for the advocates in the House and in the Senate. But those are big questions, and those are questions that, quite frankly, are not up to me to answer. That's up to not only the authors of the bill, but the advocates. And, the general fund backup is not something that I've heard any of us around here, and we all, I think, were pretty well committed to, on one of the panels that we were on, saying, no, we're not going to use general fund dollars. So I think that's a big question that has to be answered. And then what is it that Minneapolis is going to put into this? Is it going to be some of the sales tax for the old Metrodome tax that's now part of the convention center tax? Is it some of the Target Field overage? There's several $1 million worth of Target Field extra collection after Target Field, after the parks, after the libraries. That money is being used right now. Is that available? Those are questions that if they were answered, I think you probably would have seen a lot quicker committee development this week. But those aren't questions for me to answer. That's for the advocates.
So are you saying once the deadline has literally passed, you will tell us more than you're telling now? And how can we find that out?
Well, again, and the deadline, the deadlines are our deadlines. I think Senator Senjum has said that he's willing to waive the deadline in the Senate. So that's inside baseball. The bigger problem is if the stadium backs up to the general fund, and if the pull tab money or electronic, whatever the funding source doesn't fulfill what is expected, the backup is the general fund. That's a huge problem. And that's a huge problem on behalf of the taxpayers. And I've said all along that it's got to be a good deal for the people of Minnesota. And if taking money out of the general fund, which is schools, which is nursing homes, which is roads, is the backup plan, that doesn't work. And that's not just me. The governor and all the leaders have said we're not going to use the general fund as a backup plan. So I think, Pat, it's just to talk about the deadline as today. I mean, the majority leader in the Senate has already said that it'll go through the deadlines over there. So if it's passed one body, then it meets the deadline. So I think the bigger questions are, what I just laid out for you. The deadlines are inside baseball.
But you wouldn't be willing to say that failure, if nothing changes in the next 18 hours, would the stadium bill be dead?
Well, I think it's way too early to talk about that. I think, again, missing a House deadline or a Senate deadline, a self-imposed deadline, is the least of the concerns from my perspective on behalf of the taxpayers.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Clark has introduced legislation and held a foreclosure moratorium hearing Wednesday. What's your caucus's take on the possibility of a foreclosure moratorium? She hasn't gotten a second hearing.
I don't know the bill. I know there's been, a lot of federal legislation. I know there's been some lawsuits that have been settled on foreclosures. I think it's best to let some of these things that have already been put in place take effect, be successful or unsuccessful if there needs to be changes. But I think in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 17 or 18 different bills dealing with mortgage foreclosure. And if you keep changing what it is we're doing and how we're doing it, I think you probably lose your effectiveness. So I think with some of the federal programs, and I believe there's a lawsuit that was settled with the banks that are going to have something to do with foreclosure. So I think it's best to let some of these things work themselves out first before we start adding new rules or new laws.
Mr. Speaker, hitting the first deadline this week, when do you think you're on target to end session?
Oh, what's your date on the pool? Is that what you're asking?
No.
I don't think so. I think we're still on target for end of April. A lot of the bills that we think are very important are moving through the process. The tax bill going through today, repaying the shift, we passed off the House floor last night. Getting the last in, first out, in the conference committee. The things that we have focused on, as we said from the very beginning, are moving along in the process, are meeting our deadlines. And, if we're done a little early, I don't know if we'll hit Senator Bach's number. He's a little more aggressive than we are. But I do think we're on pace to be done before May 1st.
The governor has said that the Viking owners are frustrated, expressed being frustrated. Should they be, Speaker, or is the process working its way out and that's the way it goes?
I can understand where they would be. I'm frustrated down here every day. I'd like things to move a lot more quickly and go through committee a lot faster than they do, but that's a legislative process, and it moves at a glacial pace for a reason at times, to make sure that everything, and I've said this about 100 times too, that these stadium, and if you look at the proposal and all the things that go into it, these are very, very complicated issues. You're looking at one point, this pull tab money starts here and then goes down. This convention center tax starts down here and then goes up. The moving levers and parts of this bill are very intricate. And if you try to rush it through in a week or 2 weeks, it is awfully difficult. I think, quite honestly, they've been very patient, and I think the citizens of the state have been very patient as well, but you cannot rush something that is this detailed and this intricate through in a short amount of time, again, especially if it's a bad deal for the taxpayers. We will not leave here with a bad deal for the taxpayers on a stadium, on a lot of things, but especially on a stadium.
Do you remember a case where a speaker didn't support a major piece of legislation that ended up becoming law? And should that foreshadow maybe where this is headed?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure there has been in the past. I don't know that I would consider Viking Stadium, in that it's a big deal and it's a lot of money and it's a 30-year commitment, is a big deal. To me, a far bigger deal is paying back the education shift. Offering some of our small business owners tax relief, that is a huge deal, and that is something that I absolutely will advocate. I absolutely will push for and zealously advocate for the taxpayers and for these small business owners. But I think the definition should not be on, how much time you guys have to spend on it, based on your editors telling you have to spend on it, or how much time is spent at the Capitol. I think it should be based on what's important for the state. And I think paying back the education shift, property tax relief, LIFO, those are far more important for the state.
Should the Wills be putting more money in the stadium?
Well, I would always advocate for that, but that's not my choice. That's up to the advocates, and that's up to the authors of the bill. I would encourage, the advocates to reach out to members I'd encourage you to ask for votes. How many do you have in this committee? How many do you have when they get to the floors? I think that's critically important because it gauges support as well and gives you guys an idea of where it's in the process.